Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Mattia. I hope that you are doing awesome. You are listening to the Mom Care Coach. If this is your first time listening today, thank you so much for dropping by. And if you are a longtime listener, thank you so much for coming back. I hope that you enjoyed this show. So today we are talking about burnout. We kind of started this series last time. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 tips that I offer in nutrition concerning burnout. So this would be if you are currently in burnout or you have been able to get out of burnout. Congratulations. And you are just trying to put certain principles and steps in place so that you do not fall back into burnout. Now, when it comes to burnout, it is tricky for us caregivers because, many of us are autism parents and autism mothers. When it comes to burnout, often they will recommend meeting specialists and therapists in the field of recovery when it comes to burnout. They will recommend doing a few things that may or may not be accessible to us. Number one, they will say to decrease stress, and they will also say to try to get more sleep. Well, if you are an autism parent, that can be pretty tricky. However, as we talked about last time, nutrition is something that is in our court, so to speak. And so that's something we can do a lot about. However, when it comes to nutrition, there are certain tips that you want to follow so that you can get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, so that it will be really beneficial for you as you are navigating the waters of burnout, because it is really complicated and tricky for caregivers, because a lot of the things that put us into burnout we just can't change. And so what we must really be cognizant of and work on a daily basis is our 4 intentional needs, laying that beautiful foundation. So on hard days and easy days, longer seasons that are more challenging, we're able to step up to the plate. I'm using a lot of idioms today so that we can be helpful for our families and ourselves in the long run. What's different about being an autism parent, in my opinion, than meeting milestones for other typical developing children is that a lot of times our seasons are very long, meaning an example would be toddlerhood. Toddlerhood can be challenging for both the child and the parent. However, it's a limited amount of time. It's only a few years, and a lot of the different challenges that happen typically in toddlerhood only allows for that certain amount of time. However, if you have a child with special needs, especially autism, but there are other developmental disabilities that this can affect as well, that season of toddlerhood, meaning certain characteristics, certain typical issues or challenges, they can last a lot longer. Sometimes those milestones are met, and then sometimes they are not. Sometimes they are met several years after what is typically in the norm, and then sometimes they are not met at all. That's not a problem. It's just that we as parents need to be able to navigate that in our own selves, because how we may have parented at 20 or 30 can be very different at 40 or 50 when you are dealing with hormones, your own energy levels, your own health, your own mindset. All of those things can change over the years because that's just being human, right? However, as an autism parent, as you know, it's very important for us to be at our best for as long as we can and to be able to get the resources that we need and the supports that we need alongside that as we, navigate the waters of getting older as well. So, when it comes to nutrition, that can impact how we age also. There is a lot of science around that. And so we want to be able to have nutrition that really nourishes our bodies and our minds so that we can think clearly, have clarity about our true yeses and our true nos, so we are able to honor our boundaries, so that we are able to feel good and energized throughout our lifespan. When it comes to burnout, it is a time generally characterized by intense exhaustion, feelings of overwhelm. Sometimes there's lots of brain fog. It can affect our energy levels, our ability to care for ourselves and others. We can become lethargic. We may not feel as good in our bodies. We may be moving slower. We may not have as much energy, so we may not be able to do as much as we usually do. So when we are trying to get out of burnout, it is very important to focus on what it is that we're doing on a daily basis. What are we consistently doing? And then really monitor if this is helping us or it's working against us. When we're talking about specifically nutrition, there are certain things that are really important that's going to help us in the long run. The great thing about nutrition is that even after a couple days of eating better, we can start to feel better. Even though we do have to be, cognizant of allowing the time that we need to take for ourselves individually. So let's look at number one. Number one, when we are focusing on nutrition, we want to make sure that we are getting meals that have, or making meals that have high protein and high fiber. Protein helps with muscle recovery, which will aid in our intentional need when it comes to having joyful movement in our lives, but it will also help with us feeling fuller longer. It will also help with us being able to think more clear. It will also help us to have more energy. Fiber helps with elimination, digestion. It helps with us being able to feel fuller longer as well. And it's also really helpful when we, combine it together with protein. With that in mind, it's important that we are leading ourselves to number two, which is making sure that we're not having processed food and frivolous carbohydrates. Frivolous carbohydrates meaning like fast food that you would get like from takeout most of the time. Now, let me backtrack. I know that can be really challenging when you are busy and you're trying to just get everything done and juggling a lot of steps. And now I'm saying that you're needing to cut out fast food. Let me talk a little bit more about that. Not every fast food is bad. Let me even say that again. Not every fast food is bad. When we think of fast food, often we will think of things like McDonald's or Burger King. However, there are other fast food options. There's smoothie shops, there are juice bars, there are fast food restaurants that have different menus on there that are more apt to offer cleaner options. So I recommend making a list of fast food restaurants that has cleaner options. so that when you are wanting to go pick up something from a restaurant or order something, then you already have that in mind, so that you can look at the menu online and then look at and pick out a few options that work well with you and your system and your routines and your best diet plans that you're working on. Write those options down so that you have them with you. Put them also in your car. So, when you're in your car and you're like, wow, I'm kind of running late for this, I want to pick up something real quick. Let me look at my list. Oh, yes, I remember this particular restaurant has this particular meal, and it is high in protein and high in fiber, and so this will be a good option for me. If we think ahead, then it can be really, really helpful. Okay, so let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is making sure that our meals are low in sugar. The reason why that we want our meals to be low in processed sugar, that is, meaning like beet sugar, cane sugar, not overdoing it even on the coconut sugar, but a lot of these processed sugars, rice syrup, a lot of these processed sugars can spike your blood sugar and can create brain fog. These little things, even if you do it every once in a while, can contribute to burnout when it comes to nutrition. The reason why is because it can keep our body in a loop where we are doing okay for a little while in the day, and then we kind of hit a wall for whatever reason. We grab sugar, and then our blood sugars can go a little chaotic. They can spike, go down, spike again, go down, and that creates insulin, resistance, and we are not wanting that. We are wanting insulin sensitivity so that we can correct any insulin issues, unless you have a diagnosis. Now, of course, if you're working with a doctor or a practitioner that is helping you with your insulin issues, then of course go by their advice. But there is a high percentage of Americans that they don't have a diagnosis, but their blood sugar levels are chaotic. They know that between how they feel as well as what their doctors have told them. There's so many blood sugar monitors nowadays that people use. I think there's one called the Whoop Strap. There are ones that you can get with a prescription and then you have at home. So I know that there's a lot of different ways that people are aware of what their blood sugar is. And so it's important that we are not creating issues or adding to issues as we're trying to navigate burnout. Okay? Now let's talk about energy. So number 4, we want to talk about energy. We want to be aware of what kinds of foods makes us feel good, what kinds of foods makes us have more brain fog or feel more lethargic after we've eaten it. There are certain foods that can help us. So let's look at complex carbohydrates. When we are thinking about grains, if you are a grain eater, then you are wanting to have complex carbohydrates and pairing them with a healthy fat and protein if possible. So an example, we have oats, and I mentioned that one before. There's oat groats, there is regular oats. There are all kinds of options when it comes to oats, but when you make them like an oatmeal, then even if it is an overnight oats, pairing it with chia seeds or almond butter or coconut oil, different healthy fats can actually help how it goes into the bloodstream. Quinoa is another complex carbohydrate. It is also a grain. Technically, it's a seed, but most people think of it as a grain, and it actually looks like a grain, and people often cook it as a grain. And it's high in protein and it's high in fiber, so it's also a good option. And so, looking at these different things, but pairing it with like healthy fat and then protein possible. So, if you have your oats or your quinoa and you're adding some almond butter and some chia seeds or some walnuts, that's a great combination because that's your healthy fat and that's giving you some protein. So, thinking about how you feel when you're looking at your carbs, we're wanting to kind of focus on complex carbs if you are a grain eater, by itself. Thinking of other carbs would be like taking maybe a sliced apple and putting it with almond butter, or celery sticks and peanut butter. Um, there's a variety of different ways that we can put these kinds of things together. Okay. So that has to do with energy. And the reason it has to do with energy is because certain foods can kind of pull our energy away. And that's why I said to think about how you feel after you've eaten. After we've eaten, we shouldn't feel lethargic. We shouldn't feel like we need a nap. If we feel that way, then we're probably not eating in a way that is as beneficial to our bodies. Now, I'm a raw vegan, but not everybody is. And when it comes to protein, I have to be super, super careful. So, an example would be maybe you want to think about how you're wanting to prepare your food for the next day the night before. Okay, so if I'm thinking I want to make sure I have enough energy, then even as we speak, I have these protein bites that I made in my dehydrator, because I know that if I don't have enough protein throughout the day, if it's not high in protein, high in fiber, low in sugar, then it's going to affect my energy, and everything's pretty much going to go downhill after that, because my kids are really, really high energy and they need a lot of support and direction. So I have to be able to handle all of those tasks. I'm able to do that when I take care of myself and I think ahead of time. That is super important. So I encourage you as well. If you are a meat eater, think about how you can prepare those kind of foods even the night before. Can you put a whole chicken in a crock pot and then, let it cook a few hours or overnight? And then you can pair that with some veggies, potatoes, carrots, celery, rutabagas, whatever it is that you like. That makes sure that you have food on the table and you always have what you need. If you are a person that loves, lots of food, but you like a lot of sweet things, then you can add in certain fruits, like berries, are lower in sugar than some of the other ones. And if you like sweet things like bananas, maybe pairing your bananas with your overnight oats or your quinoa, a little bit of banana in your quinoa for breakfast, and then pairing that with a nut butter and a few pumpkin seeds. That can create a really lovely complex carb, and it allows you to be able to have the things that you enjoy, satisfying your sweet tooth, as well as getting you the nutrition that your body is needing. Pairing that with making sure that you are choosing healthy options when you go out to restaurants or fast food restaurants, even when you are in a hurry, can be very, very helpful. Having things on hand is really the best way to do it. When you have some protein powder at home, or you have like some nuts and seeds in your car, that is going to help you. When you are running low on time and you haven't been able to think through your meal plan, if you have certain items always on hand, that is going to help you whip up a quick meal. If you always have in your pantry maybe a couple cans of black beans and tomatoes, and you already have some, gluten-free tortillas in your freezer, then you're going to always have that to be able to whip up in a pinch, even if you haven't had a chance to go to the grocery store yet, or if you had to stay late at work, or if your kiddos had extra therapies and you haven't had an opportunity to do a lot of planning. If you already have certain things on hand, it is going to help you so much for you as a family as well as your children. Now, when it comes to snacks, that is also something, number 5, that I think is really important. Snacks are important. They don't necessarily have to be bad for you. They can be good for you. And thinking about what can be options for you, like I said, in your car, in your freezer, in your fridge, can be very helpful when it comes to when you're in a pinch or when you're just thinking about what you should have every day. Greek yogurt, non-dairy yogurt, pairing, like I said, some dried fruit with some nut butters, pairing, chopped veggies with some hummus. Those kinds of things is going to help you, and it's going to help you feel fuller longer, and they're low in sugar. So to recap, we want to be cognizant of making sure we have high protein, high fiber. We want to make sure we have low sugar, low processed sugar for certain. Make sure that we know about snacks, and then being aware of how we are spending our energy and how we feel after we have eaten meals. Being aware of any type of energy leaks. Now, energy leaks can go into a lot of different areas, not just with nutrition, meaning how we're using our phone, if we're giving our resources, emotional, mental, all of that out without thinking that through. That's a whole different scenario. But when it comes to energy leaks for nutrition, we don't want to have frivolous meals that will expand us where we're feeling somewhat full, but we're kind of just filled with candy and chips and high glycemic index snacks. We don't want that because over time we're not going to feel as well, and it can be difficult to maintain a system that is staying out of burnout. And these tips can be effective if you are no longer in burnout and you're just wanting to continue not being in burnout. We want to make sure that we are solidifying our nutrition, because sometimes when challenging seasons come along and they just kind of come out of nowhere, and then we don't want to, run over stumbling block and then get back into burnout again. So, it's really important for us to focus on these things and think about these things before it is an issue and as we are getting out of burnout. And of course, take good care of yourself. Be patient with yourself. Acknowledge the small wins. Also, make sure that you're drinking lots of water. Half of your body weight should be in water as well. And, these kind of systems sometimes can go slow, and it's okay. Be patient with yourself, love where you are at, and understand it takes time, okay? So I hope that this has been an effective and understandable episode that is easy for you to put in place in your life. And I look forward to speaking with you next time. And of course, as always, take good care.